Hello, I'm Eric Matisik, co-chair of Denver Startup Week. Last year, we were able to bring the global audience together for Denver Startup Week, and this year, we're excited to welcome that global audience back as we celebrate and showcase the best of entrepreneurship that the Denver ecosystem in Colorado has to offer, in Denver and beyond. There are lots to explore this week, but most importantly, we're excited that you're joining us. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make Denver Startup Week possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our headquarters and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life, Capital One Cafe, the Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork, and our track sponsors who've made all the great content you're hearing today possible, which includes our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, our growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, design track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and the spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing this excitement to the entire week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and the VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our sponsors and member sponsors who are listed on the screen, and thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Hello, Denver. We are so excited to be here. We're excited to tell you a bit more about the Foundry for Builders program and to be a part of the Denver startup ecosystem. We moved our headquarters to Denver in the last year, and we're excited to call Denver home. Foundry for Builders, essentially we're offering our end-to-end Foundry solution that is deployed to major governments and enterprises worldwide, to early and growth stage companies so that they can build their business on Foundry from day one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name is Ryan Margolis and I'm the Product Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At DSW, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week.
All right, hello. We got this screen shared. Okay. Does that look okay?
Yep, you're looking good.
All right. Cool. So hello, everybody. Welcome to Choosing a Direction, learning how to test ideas and designs. Really excited for everyone to join us. Hopefully you're having a great Denver Startup Week. We have a lot to get through. This is what our agenda looks like. We're going to say hello and introduce you to ourselves. We're going to talk a bit about UX research and the design thinking process, the benefits of testing, talk about how to plan testing and what testing outputs look like, and then a little bit about the importance of engaging your team throughout that process. So, Lise, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, hello, my name is Lise Maitland. I have been working in the internet and app world now for over 20 years. I currently work for a large health insurance company here in the Denver area. And I'm not allowed to say the name unless I get all sorts of legal permission. So you can look on my LinkedIn if you want to know who it is. And my team, I've built a team of researchers at this company from the ground up, which has been really exciting in their digital division. So we're responsible for research from product inception to implementation. So it's a really, really fantastic space to be in. In the past, I've led research for enterprise level companies such as Transamerica, DaVita, Scottrade, and Securian. And I've lived and worked in the whole design Denver area now for over 20 years. How about you, Ari?
Hey, my name is Ari Weissman. I'm currently the Senior Director of User Experience and Community at Crown Peak, a B2B software company. I have about 15 years experience of UXing things, everything from user research and product strategy through analytics and design. I'm also an instructor at General Assembly for UX and research. And I'm excited about these topics. I also have built at Crown Peak a research practice and really help the organization understand how to approach identifying opportunities to validate ideas, to validate solutions. In my past life, Lisa and I were actually colleagues at a software design agency where I also worked with a lot of big companies to help them test ideas and build out solutions. So we're excited to share what we've learned over the course of our careers with you.
So I'll be talking a little bit at first about the UX research and design process. Next slide, please. So this is a wonderful quote from the Vice President of Design at IBM. To many people, conducting user research is a bit like cleaning up the garage. They know it'd be a good thing to do and would bring some real benefits, yet somehow they never quite get around to it. And I think part of that is because people don't have a clear understanding of how to approach it and the value that it can bring to them. And when we talk about what user research is, this is a great quote from, I can never say his last name, I'll admit. So from the authors of Observing User Experience, user research focuses on understanding users' behaviors, needs, motivations through observation techniques, task analysis, and other feedback methodologies such as usability, interviews, surveys. And the big piece of this is it's the process of understanding the impact of design on an audience. So when we start talking about that, if we look at the next slide, when we start talking about, well, what do you mean the impact of design on the impact on the design process? The first thing it means is it doesn't come just at the end and to check a box and to say, oh yeah, okay, we did some usability testing, it's usable. What it really is talking about looking at where you are in the product life cycle and understand what type of research you need to do based on that. So to set the stage, I'm going to walk through this concept, which is the double diamond concept, kind of quickly so we can get to the idea of, so we can get to some of the conversation around validating ideas and assumptions and solutions. The really nice thing about this double diamond is that it has two phases. One is the problem space, and that's that first diamond. And the second one is the solution space, which is that second diamond. And at the crux of this concept is that each one of these diamonds represent a chance for you to diverge and to converge with your ideas. So the discover process that you see is in that first diamond, in the first half of the diamond, you're diverging and you're looking at all sorts of ideas, and then you're converging and you're defining what you're going to do. Same sort of thing on the develop and deliver in the next diamond. That develop, you're looking at lots of different solutions and then defining what you actually are going to deliver. So I'll talk really quickly about those because I found that when you really start to think about the difference of the problem and solution space, it really makes it much more clear the kind of research that you would like to do.
Yeah, and definitely something that I've learned over the course of my career is when I worked for agencies, we would go and we start talking about doing user research and testing. The thought was always it comes at the end. You've built something, you've designed it, let's just make sure it works. And that's very risky. And so having a framework to talk about what are the different opportunities throughout the process where you can validate ideas, validate solutions, really helps when you're communicating to people who don't understand the concept of front loading some of that work.
Yeah. So the next slide, we're talking about the problem space in the double diamond. So when we're really talking about the problem space, the goal here, the things that we're doing in this space is to identify a strategy and develop a plan. So some people also call this design the right thing. So what do you do to do that? You explore the problem space. So that's in that discover, diverge space. You can't arrive at a solution if you don't understand what the problem is. You do an exploration phase because it's critical to innovation, because you're never going to iterate towards a transformational solution. If you start with a website and iterate, you'll probably end up with a website, maybe a phone app, but you won't see the other opportunities. Like maybe you need something in the physical world. Maybe there is some other piece that's needed to support those experiences for people. So in the problem space, this is where we're really understanding the domain and the people. We're looking outwards. What are people's current problems and how are they solving them now? And what's well served and used frequently, we might not want to go into that. But if we find the things that are used frequently and not well served, those are the areas where we probably would want to go in and really start looking at innovative areas and what those problems that need to be solved on. So what needs are we focusing on for people? So after we go through that wonderful discovery process, then we're able to align on an approach. Say, okay, we've looked at this and we figured out what the problem space is, where the opportunities are that people really need solved. I can't tell you how many products I've worked on that they had a solution before they ever looked at the product. And we made a beautiful website that totally worked, looked gorgeous, you could get through the task, but it didn't solve a problem for anybody. So nobody really used it. So you run the risk, if you don't do this discovery up front, of making something very beautiful, but unusable or unnecessary. So in this place, this is where we're really testing the ideas, not the final website, but we're testing the ideas. Are these things that people need? Are these solving a solution? Is this something that actually has a need in the world? And this is where we really get the great user experiences. So if you are able to understand the problem, then you're able to really give people a solution that is a good experience, not just a solution that works on its own. So I have in the next slide, there's a fantastic proverb that I found, which vision without action is a daydream and action without vision is a nightmare. So to break this down a little bit, when we're talking about vision without action is a daydream. So we spend all our time in the problem space, just reveling in the problems and the opportunities, but if we don't do anything with it, it's still a daydream, right? And if we move into the solution space without a vision, then we have a nightmare. Then you have a solution in looking for a problem. So you're spending all your time trying to figure out, well, what am I solving for? What am I solving for? Do people really need this? What's the objective of this? Why are we doing this? Okay, great. You had this wonderful idea, but does it solve any problem? And so I think all of us have worked on projects where you don't have that vision and you spend all your time with a solution seeking a problem to solve, which is not what you want to be doing. And it's a major waste of time. So when we talk about moving from the solution space into from the problem space into the solution space, we've done the work to really understand what that vision is. What is the problem? Who are the users? What are we actually trying to solve? We've tested ideas. We've figured out the beginnings of the things that work. And then we move into the next phase, which is the solution space. And that's where the goal is to really work through those trade-offs to deliver an optimal solution. So that's where we say, oh, you know what, we could approach this problem in 4 different design ways, and we can start testing those and understand which ones work better, or start doing the best practices research to see what's been adopted and what's really working in the industry already. So this is really where we're looking at designing things right. So we know what the problem is, we know we're designing the right thing, now we want to design it right. So we explore all of those solutions, we diverge on that. And then we figure out exactly how we want to design that, and we start to converge on what that final delivery, that final outcome is. And this is really where great usability comes from. This is where you're like, yes, it works well. And we know that it's going to have a better chance of success because we know that the problem space, we know that it's actually solving someone's problem. So when we launch it, we have both of these pieces taken care of, and we understand the problem and we've developed a good solution for it. So we don't just have this wonderful solution in search of a problem. So some of the benefits of research in general is it can help provide a deep qualitative insight about how people use a product or how they think about a problem. You really understand the problem from the user's perspective instead of from just the market research. Does it have product market fit? Those sorts of things. Or just the product manager's view, or even just your own view if it's your own product of like, oh, I think this would be really great to have. But you don't know if there's an audience for it. So if you actually do the work, you can start to understand the problems people are trying to solve and how your product can fit into their world instead of vice versa. And you get to learn about the hidden things that we didn't know. There's so many times you go out and you interview people and you ask them to tell you about a day in the life of working with this problem, whether it's an enterprise solution or a consumer product. And all of a sudden you find out all of these other things through the interviews that we didn't even know about because it's not something well documented in the industry. It allows us to validate our assumptions. We're able to say, oh, we really think that people will love this because it will fit into their healthcare management and help them understand their claims better. But then we realize that this particular thing doesn't really work for that group anyway. So validating the assumptions of and invalidating assumptions is a big piece. As we get more into the design process, a huge piece of it is really removing opinions. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room with designers arguing, are we going to do it this way or are we going to do it that way? And they might be two perfectly valid design ideas, but we're able to take them out with the appropriate audience and see what actually works for them. And it might not even be designers. It might be the highest paid person in the room or the president of the company saying this needs to be in a certain flow, or we need to represent it this way. And we can take it out and actually test it and see what works for people or not. And so it takes a lot of the argument and opinions out of what can end up being a contentious process if you don't have that kind of data to inform it. And the next thing that's awesome is that it allows you to measure the delta between designs. So you might have an existing product and you can do a benchmark test on it and understand how well it's used and the problems, and you can do a new design and run the exact same test on the new designs and see what the delta is. Did you actually solve the problems or not? Did you were you able to make the solution something that was useful to people where maybe it was difficult previously? Research also really helps create alignment. When you have that data to support design decisions, it's really hard for everyone to start trying to throw their own opinions around or have their own pet ideas, because the data very clearly makes it brings everyone together because you understand what the overall problems are with both the ideas and the solutions. And it reduces the cost of delivering a successful product. When you've actually done the work in advance, you can deliver a product that solves a problem and that is a good and elegant solution to that problem. So you aren't just launching a product that it's in search of a problem or vice versa. So when you can spend that time in design instead of in development to work out these problems, you're not going to cost as much. We all know that development takes a while, and it's a lot easier to move some pixels around on a screen, change some flows and retest than ask your entire development team to re-prototype or remake an entire site just so that you can see if it's better than the other one.
I love the bullet point about learning about hidden things. I think that if we go in and we talk with a user, a customer, or someone, and we don't learn anything, we're probably doing something wrong, right? Like there's always something that you learn. And there, examples of, we were really focused on this feature and people weren't using it. And we were trying to figure out what can we fix in this feature to get people to use it. And we had a conversation and realized there was something over here that is stopping people from using it, right? There's a blocker that's upstream that's impacting this feature. And we're not going to know that. We're not going to see that unless we had that conversation. And we talked about, well, like, tell us about the experience you're having. And, oh, my pain point is actually this. Let's dig into that. And like that, clearly that's impacting the things downstream. Like I love those aha moments. And I love when we can, bring our partners, our peers, our colleagues into that process. So we can have that aha moment together and have discussions about it.
Yes, I totally agree. And, there've been plenty of projects where the client I was working with had assumptions about their product, and they thought people were working it all day long. And then we go out and we do the research and we find out that people just jump in and out of it, and the data they're looking for is really difficult to find. And so, okay, let's surface the data people actually want and make it easier for them to get to that data. And with their uptake of their product was like double what it was previously, and the satisfaction rate went up because we were able to go and see what people were doing and see that they spent about 5 or 10 minutes and they had their passwords on their computer and they had their cheat sheet on their, on a document on their desktop to remind them how to even use it and where to find the information. You're like, wow, that's a big usability issue with this product. And just by moving some things around and surfacing some data, you're able to increase the usability of it tremendously.
Should we keep moving?
Yes, we should.
All right.
All right. So a lot of us look at that and say, oh my goodness, that's a lot. I don't have that kind of time. If you've got limited time and access to your users, if you have ideas and you want to know if they have a chance in the market, if you want to learn more about your users, and if you have a prototype or some well-defined concepts, there's a lot you can do in a single interview. It might not be the perfect double diamond process, but you can spend some time to really get to know your users, their process, and if your current idea is something that works within what they're doing. So this is a cute little video that Ari and I absolutely adore. It's not that hard to really do some basic usability. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the, a little bit more of the interview stuff a little bit later on, but it's not that hard to test with a paper prototype or any sort of really basic prototype, or even with some easy concepts. And so here's an example of a man who is doing some testing with a child with a coloring app, all paper prototype. And he goes through and really nicely labels each part of the interview, and you can start to see how an interview can come together.
So Amelia, thank you very much for being here for this usability test today. We're planning a brand new website for kids and we'd like your help. For your help today, I've got a special present for you after we finish. You see it? You'll get it when we're done. And this shouldn't take more than about 30 minutes. If you need to take a break at any time, just let me know and we can take a break, okay?
Okay.
Before we begin, I'd like to ask you a few questions. First, how often do you go online?
Every day.
Every day. Okay. What websites do you go to?
The junior.
And what's your favorite website?
PBS Kids.
Oh, so there's more than one website you like? Does mom and daddy let you go online anytime you want?
Not anytime.
Oh, okay. So when do you get to go online?
Mommy says yes, I can. If she says no, I can't.
Oh, okay. This pen will be your mouse. Why don't you take it? Great. If you want to click on something, just tap on it with your pen. So what do you think about this website?
It is great.
It's great. What's great about it?
I like the word.
What do you think you can do from here?
I can do games, coloring pages, and videos.
Great. Okay, thank you. I want you to remember that you came here to find pages to color in. Okay. All right. So that's what I'd like you to do, is find some pages to color in. What would you do?
I could click on here.
Okay. When you click on there, it takes you to a page like this. Is this what you expected?
Yes.
What do you think you can do from here?
I can click on the buttons.
And what would that do?
Take you to coloring pages.
Oh, okay, what would you want to click on? Triceratops?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. You like all of them?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's go to the kitty one, okay? So that brings you,
That's probably enough.
to this page.
I love that video.
Yes, I think they do a great job of really breaking down all of the components of a usability test and the objectives of why you actually ask those kinds of questions. So the next piece that Ari and I want to talk about is really like how you can go about validating your ideas and your designs and how to plan out some of that.
Yeah. And we have a title of planning research, and I think that sometimes research can be a dirty word when you're talking with someone who doesn't really understand what you're trying to achieve. Research sounds lengthy, sounds time consuming, sounds expensive. And sometimes the words you use help, sneak in under the radar a bit to help achieve your goals if you're running into blockers. So I think validating your idea is like, hey, I just want to quickly validate this idea might sound a little more palatable than I want to plan this research activity. So let's talk about validating your ideas, validating your designs. When you're planning your validation activity, there's a bunch of stuff that you need to think about to have good outcomes. And we're going to touch on each of these, but know that each one of these sections could be another hour talk. The things that are important for you to consider, at least at a high level, are what are the goals you're trying to achieve with that particular engagement? Where are you in that double diamond? And therefore, what sort of activities and what sort of goals will you achieve based on the thing that you have that you need to validate, whether it's an idea or a design? Who is your audience? Who are the people this thing is for? What should you be asking? What are the questions you will ask, knowing you have limited time with these users, with these customers, with these people, potentially? When you do have that time with these people, what do you write down? What are the notes you should be tracking, you should be taking to make sure you will have good outcomes? And then how do you make sense of the data? Once you have it, once you've spoken with a bunch of people and you have all of these notes, what do you do with it so that you can have good outcomes? And often when I'm teaching, when I'm talking with my team, I'll start at the end. I'll start with what is the presentation we are going to need to have, right? What do we need to present to the CEO, the chief product officer, the product team, the development team, whoever it is? Does it need to be very formal or informal? What is it we need to have, and how do we work backwards to make sure we're targeting the right things? So let's talk about goals. What are your goals? Do you want to validate the problem? Are you solving the right problem? Is there really a problem there at all? Or do you want to validate a solution? Do you have alignment on the problem already, and you have a bunch of different ideas about how to solve that problem? Some of those solutions, right? You saw in that video when we're talking about what you can usability test if you're on the second part of that diamond, it could be something that is a really low fidelity pencil sketch, or it could be a very high fidelity design. When you're thinking about your goals and what you can test, whether you're in the first part of the diamond or the second part of the diamond, it doesn't have to be a finished product. I've tested with all of these levels of fidelity. I mean, even things that would come before some of these. So you can test and you can validate a slogan or a persona or a product description or a story or a narrative to help you validate a problem. If you talk about a slogan or a persona, right, and you're talking with the user, have you heard something like this before? Have you experienced this problem before? If you were to have something like this, product description, story, or narrative, how would it have helped in an experience you've previously had? Tell me about that experience. Or you could have a story or a narrative, a concept design, a wireframe, a visual design, or existing product or service where you want to test a solution, where you have alignment around, you know this is a problem, you just don't know how to solve the problem. At one of these fidelities, what's the right, if we have different options, which solution, if I show you these two different things, these two different stories, which one of these do you think would best solve your problem and why? What's an example from the past that would help me understand that? If I have a wireframe, show me how you would use this to solve the task or the activity or the outcome that you were trying to achieve. Next is thinking about your audience. who will use the thing you're building? Are you sure? Are you sure that that is the right audience? How do you know? What are the behaviors that you can use to identify those people? Often we might target an audience based on a demographic. And I've had experience doing that, and it was painful. I was hired by a large telco to look at how do they improve their services to reduce cord cutting, right? For people who maybe only get internet, but they're not getting TV. And so we recruited people who have TV in their homes to better understand their purchasing process of how they purchased cable TV and what they did and what they looked at. And so the demographics were people who have TV in their homes, cable TV. And we arrived and we started talking with these people, and I asked, well, tell me about the experience that you had purchasing cable TV. And the response was, oh, well, my mom bought it. I just watched TV. Or my partner bought it. I just watched TV. Or I just got what the last person in the house had. So I wasn't really, we didn't really have a process. And so that was a very tough learning experience for me, because I used the demographic instead of the behavior of, I want to talk to people who had made the purchase, who had been part of the purchasing process, who were the key decision maker in the household for that purchasing process. So when you're really thinking about your audience and you're going to validate a problem or a solution, think about the audience that you need based on their behaviors, who are going to be the right audience for that validation. And think about where you can find them. Are these people you can recruit because you have their data, because they use their service? Are they people you're going to have to go through some intermediary to get to? How do you make sure you find the right people? And why is that important? It's important because you can learn valuable things by asking the right people the wrong questions. But if you're asking the wrong people, it doesn't matter what you ask. That's a great, great quote. Making sure you're talking to the right people, you can learn a lot, even if you're not really asking the right questions. In that example I gave before, if I was really focused on this feature, I want to know about this feature, and we sort of meandered over to the thing that was blocking them from using it. But if I'd been talking to the wrong people, like I was when, with the telco example, I wasn't going to learn anything about the process. And that's painful. So taking the time to really think critically about the behaviors you're looking for, the right audience, and having that discussion and alignment with your team, with your organization, will pay dividends. And so now we have our goals and we have an audience, and we should be thinking about, what questions should I ask? And as you're thinking about what questions should I ask, have my little voice in your head. What do you already know? I know, that'd be, how awesome would it be to have my voice in your head all the time? What do you all, don't shake your head. What do you already know? What do you assume, but you don't know as a fact? And what don't you know? And so to fill in some of that, start with your existing data. Do desktop research to answer some of those questions. Look at literature review. Look at a competitive analysis. Look at market analysis, domain research, Google Scholar. Hold workshops with internal stakeholders, capture institutional knowledge. Gather as much information as you can to start answering those questions. Why is that important? It's important because time is precious. You may have half an hour or 15 minutes with someone, or maybe an hour. You're not going to get through everything. So as much as you can, gather what you know, validate what you know, and prioritize the things that you don't know. So when you're speaking with users, you're able to get those things that are the highest priority that you're iffy about at the top, and then you can work your way down. Validate what you assume or don't know. Does your problem resonate? Is it a true problem that people have faced in the past? Can they explain where they have had experiences where this has been a problem for them and blocked them from achieving their goals? Does your solution solve the specific problem? Or does it solve a different problem that they have? Or does it not solve a problem at all? Fill in the knowledge gaps. Ask open-ended questions, just like you saw in the video, and look for real-world stories, right? I did this thing and I had this problem. Don't look for, would you use this thing, right? Which is perhaps the worst question in the world to ask. Ari, would you go to the gym? Sure. Will I go to the gym? Fairly unlikely. I'd like to say 50-50, but it's probably 10-90. Ask about context, workflow, triggers, pain points. Ask open-ended questions to help the person talk about the experiences they have had and give context to them. One of the things I also really love is to compare multiple options. So if you're trying to figure out which is a bigger problem or to understand which problem resonates the most, say, look, we have these 3 different problems that we think might be worthwhile tackling. What do you think, right? Give me examples of which one of these has been a bigger problem for you. Or we have these 3 different solutions. Tell me which is going to be more valuable for you and why, right? And not just which do you like, but why shows me I like this better than this because some context, right? There is some rationale that makes this more valuable, and I'm going to keep asking why until they give me that information, until they help me understand why this thing is not as good and why this thing is better.
Or if you haven't had the chance to work in the problem space, you can start to use those to fill in some of those things that you don't know. So you're giving them 3 options. So like, yeah, really none of these work for me. What I really need is blah, blah, blah. So that's some of the stuff we talked earlier about finding those those little hidden gems of information that we didn't know. So having multiple options allows them another way to start telling their story.
Yeah. If you lock someone into just talking about this thing, they'll talk about this thing. But you're really interested in solving, in understanding, right? All of this is about building understanding. Are your assumptions right? Are you moving in the right direction, or do you need to pivot? You're learning. So you have your goals, you have your audience, you have the questions, you've gone in and you've talked, or you're about to talk with these people. What do you write down? What is important? We frequently write down the negatives and not often enough write down the positives. And I often remind myself and my team, make sure we write down the things that are working well, because it's important to celebrate the fact that we've done a good job, right? It always feels good to get the pat on the back, but we also want to make sure not to fuck it up. We don't want to take away the things that are working and change them. We want to read between the lines. We want to be able to interpret what the users are saying. And I'm jump down to number 4. We want to be able to interpret the tone and the body language. So like the example Elise just gave, right, reminded me of that. So do you like this idea? Yeah. Right? Yes, they like this idea. And we take that back to our stakeholders, right? That's not what they said. I mean, they said yes. Interpretation of tone and body language. Your role is to hear what people are saying and to understand what they're saying, and then to write down what you think they mean and what you think they need. What can we deliver? Do we really understand the problem? Which of these solutions really will satisfy their needs? Look for trends across users. You do not want to solve the problem for just one person. You want to solve the problem for as broad an audience as possible. What you may discover is there are 2 different trends because your audience is actually segmented. You find a nuance, you find a fracture, you find this audience actually prefers this type of solution or really resonates with this problem, and this part of the audience, even though, right, you recruited from the same behaviors, may be different. That's okay. Identify the trends and identify if there are trends between segments. Write down quotes. You'll notice that in our presentation, we tend to use quotes because people like them. They're easy to share. They're easy to create some sort of emotional bond with. If you've written down Bob from this company talked about this specific thing, instead of user 1 said this, Bob said, this is really a challenge for me because I struggle with this and this, right? It resonates and it makes your presentations much better. It's very difficult to go back and find those. It's much easier to write them down in the moment. Also write down suggestions for improvement, right? And that is, positives and negatives, but not just this thing was wrong, but what could we do to improve this? How can we fix this thing to make it better? Not necessarily taking exactly what they say and building it, but using that as an opportunity to continue interpreting what they're looking for. Why did they said build this? Actually, it's not this, add this feature. Why? What is it that our first version is missing that they're looking for? Oh, it's probably a download. okay, well, maybe we don't need to put the button here like they said, but they need to download. Let's actually interpret what they're trying to do with that download, with that export, and then iterate on that, right? Have some solutions for that particular problem.
I think a great example of that, Ari, is I was working on a healthcare system, and all of the nurses said that they wanted a specific piece of data that they didn't have on the home screen about a patient. They wanted it at the top, and they wanted it red and blinking. Okay, we're not going to make it red and blinking. But that kind of emphasis about what that suggestion for improvement meant is that this is really, really important data. So we need to make sure we surface this and have it readily available for them. In this case, it was about people's allergies, so that they didn't give them something that could potentially cause an anaphylactic reaction. And they had to dig a couple pages down. And they also wanted to know the do not resuscitate on that top level. And those two very, very important pieces of data weren't there. And they had said, I had many nurses say, just make it red and blinking. But we don't take that as a literal design suggestion. We take that as, this is a really important piece of information. And to add to what Ari was saying around the interpretation and the trends, it's also a good thing to kind of say at the end of an interview, what would we design for this person? What's missing for them? And just kind of take a quick sketch and capture of that. And if you start seeing that same trend over and over and over through all of your interviews, you might have a really good opportunity there, because everyone's saying, I don't have this one thing and this is what I need.
Yeah. I would, as just to be very simple, take these 6 questions. And after you have an interview, sit down and answer each one of these 6 questions as a debrief. And maybe you do that as a team for whoever participated, but write down, take from all of your notes, you may have pages and pages of notes, distill it down to maybe answering these 6 questions after you're done. Because I've definitely been in interviews where we've asked someone, do you like, I don't ask do you like, but like, tell me about the previous experience where you've used this thing. Oh, I've done this. And I've asked again, well, have you used something like this? And they've responded, no. And you get conflicting responses that you then have to interpret. So if you just take the notes from the beginning, you would get a different answer if you took the notes from the end. So you always want to do some sort of reflection at the end, and starting with these 6 questions would be a great framework. Should we talk about what testing outputs look like?
Sure.
All right. Over to you then.
Awesome. So, we're here at Denver Startup Week, right? We know that not everybody has a huge budget, and testing outputs can be incredibly simple or they can be incredibly formal. This is actually an example of something that Ari and I did together. We did some very fast interviews, and we needed to get design recommendations really quickly to our designers. We had every page of the application that we tested printed out, and we used orange for things that had to change, green for things that were good, and like pink for things that were major pain points. I think orange was maybe neutral. And so we just wrote, you can see here, that's my really crappy handwriting on some of that. Really quick things so that the designers we could walk them through the whole thing. We could show them the trends that we're seeing, and they had specific examples right there that they could use immediately, while we went and made the more formal thing that our client wanted. Because we had tight timelines, we need to get this turned around. So if what you're doing is design feedback really quickly, or just needing to make those really quick decisions, this is totally acceptable way to do it. You've collected your data, you've used this to synthesize it. It's fast and it's cheap, and it works. As we go along, we're going to talk a little bit more about different levels of fidelity or even different tools. So this is also very quick. This is actually done in Miro. We started doing a lot more Miro right before the pandemic, and then went full bore on Miro during the pandemic, because this has been one of the best ways to collaborate. So this is an example, a very tiny example on purpose, of a set of screens. And each of the people that were watching the research were taking notes on sticky notes and putting them on there. So we had different colors: yellow for activities, blue for general notes, red for pain points, and everyone's notes were there, and we could really quickly pull it together and say, oh, here's all the pain points on this. We could do some very quick affinity mapping to pull those together, do some very fast analysis, come up with some recommendations, and put that on the Miro screen. So when we're looking at it as a team, We have all of the data, all of the observations right there, and then what it was synthesized into the analysis and recommendations for the next step. And Miro boards stay around a little bit longer than things taped on a wall with highlighter. So these, and you can export them to PDF and that sort of thing as well. So we can go on to a little bit more fidelity. This is actually a report. It's a pretty straightforward report, but as Ari was talking about before, you know, someone might say, yes, I will use that, but you can tell by their tone of voice that they're not. So we can, and this one, we gave it green, yellow, and red. Green, they liked it. Yellow was neutral, red was woo, we really need to change this, and some recommendations on each one of those pages. You can see that this text accompanied a screenshot that had each of those things highlighted as well. So it was really quick and clear to understand what needed to change or what was good on a page. This takes a little bit more time to put together, but usually if you need something to really show a product manager, or you have to have something a little bit more to use for persuasion, a report like this is a fantastic way to go. The very last one is one that we don't really do very often anymore, is like these big formal usability or big formal research reviews. So this is one that that I actually did on a cable provider many years ago, and we broke down every single page. We had quotes, we had recommendations, we had all of this data all about each page, and then a big synthesis at the end in our recommendations. This takes a while to put together. And if you're trying to persuade executive level people, yes, you might need this because they need to hear the thunk of the report hitting the desk. They aren't going to read it. They are going just to read the executive summary and the recommendations. But sometimes you need this level of detail, but it's, in my world, it's more and more infrequent, and it's much more in the agile world of making faster design decisions and moving on.
So there are a couple of lenses to look through this, right? The first is, like Lisa said, who is your target audience for these reports? If you are deeply embedded with the engineering team and we just need to, like, what did we hear? Let's make decisions. Going low fidelity, the first one we shared, is great, because all of this you're just going to throw out, right? All of this is just to help you make a decision. And then you move on. Things will evolve, and the utility of all of these reports lessens over time. So if you're talking with your development team, your product team, and you want to make a quick decision, great. If you're talking with your CEO, you probably want something that looks a little more buttoned up, a little more formal. Another lens to look at it is in terms of risk. If you're really looking at, you have good validation about the problem, you have really good validation about the solution, and you're polishing the solution, right? You're looking more at interaction design and usability testing. Go low fidelity, right? Because you have a lot of confidence. You don't need a lot of detail. Identify the areas that are pain points, target them, and fix them. If you're in a very high risk situation where you are validating a problem that you probably want to put $1 million towards, right? You want more detail. You're going to want to really have deep understanding of what's going on in the market. What did you learn from your, all of your desk research we talked about? How can you triangulate all of these different data sources to validate that this is a problem, this really is the audience, and take all of that information and make a case for it. It doesn't have to look as pretty, but if you're in a high risk, I think high risk is a good frame for it. If you're making a really important decision that's going to be expensive, you're going to want to spend more time feeling comfortable that it's a good decision, substantiating that decision, even for yourself. All right.
So, I think we've all now been living in COVID for a while, and it's changed research. It really has. We used to talk a lot more about doing guerrilla research. Now we have to be a lot more deliberate in what we're doing. We have to really plan it out. We have to use often technological solutions to have our conversations like we are today. So we have to be digital and virtual. It's very lower amount of contextual observation. We can still ask people to take pictures of their workspace or try to share their desktop, but you don't get that other piece of people interrupting them, walking into their office and seeing the other, programs they're using and the other tools that they're using and the way they use paper to keep track of important information. So you have to do a lot more in the interviews to try and understand those pieces that we used to be kind of take for granted by being in person with them. We really need to focus on the personal touch and relationship building, because now we have to make sure that people are comfortable sharing this with us in a digital way. When you're in person with somebody, you're able to do a few more kind of social things to put people at ease. When you're on WebEx or Zoom or any of those other platforms, you have to really build their trust so they're willing to share and give you real data. So we also, you can see some of the Miro board stuff that we have in there. We've had to create new strategies for analysis because Ari and I can't get together anymore, print out all of the paper and highlight things and then tape it up on a wall where everyone else can see it. We're not in that space, which was really quick and dirty. So what are the ways that we can do analysis and debrief together, but not in person? So using things like Miro board or Mural, using whiteboarding or Google Docs or OneNotes, things that everyone can access and contribute to at the same time is a really big piece. Because one of the important things with research, which we will talk about in a minute, is it's very important to have the entire team engaged. If you go off in a silo and you do it all by yourself, it's very, very hard to get the buy-in that you need. So you need to ensure that you have other people along all through the process. And so how do you do that? Oh, hey, perfect segue. So engaging your team. So you need to make sure that your team is at every step of the way with you. That if you have a team, make sure that you are working on the goals and the audience together. That you understand that you have the same objective for the research. That if you are the one moderating the research, make sure that other people are there observing or included in the note taking, like you saw with the Miro board that I showed. And at the end, debrief together. So Ari talked about those 6 items as being a really good framework for how do you capture some of this really important knowledge immediately that's not the notes, but it's your very quick analysis of the situation of that person right after. And if you're doing a lot of interviews, they start to kind of blend together after a couple days. And so this is kind of like your index to your interview with that person. You can say, oh yeah, they had this problem, this problem, and this problem. And this is what I built for them. And this was the 3rd person I saw having the same problem. So you can start putting together in those debriefs some of your beginning ideas that go into some of that collaborative analysis as well. So when you are working together, you can pull your debrief sheets and use those to help jog your memory about that interview. And you'll have all the people that participated in observing and note-taking in that collaborative analysis. So you maybe had 3 from one team or 4 from another team, but they all come together and start sharing their observations. And the really nice part about this is if you've got product people or designers, or they bring their context, and you can actually hammer out a lot of the recommendations in context of what it means for those players. So they are then bought in all the way along. And when you provide the recommendations, they're like, oh yeah, I saw that. There was one project where I was on where we actually had all of the different observers come together and tell stories about the sessions that they observed, because they were long 2-hour interviews, very in depth around a product, and everybody, we had somebody for a day apiece. So we were able to do 2 or 3 interviews with each person. And so each person took one of the most impactful interviews and shared it out with the rest of the team to really build empathy and help other people hear the story that they heard that the other people didn't. And so out of all of this, you have your recommendations, you have your opportunities, and then you need to prioritize them. What's most important to the product that you're doing? What is most important for your MVP? And what are the follow-on ones? And then as a team, you can also determine the next steps. As researchers, we can't go much farther than recommendations. And we hope to create recommendations that are not design specific, that aren't saying, put a button here. We are trying to say, here's the user problem, and we recommend that you make it easy for them to do this. We don't say, here's the user problem, and you could fix it by putting a big blue button right here on the page. So you really, as a researcher, kind of are handing things over at that point to your team, and you have to work together to make sure those steps are the ones that they'll take.
Some of us, right, wear many hats, and we're researchers and designers, and, strategists and all of that. But I guess in thinking about it, making a pitch for, even if you are the designer and the researcher, there's something nice about someone else testing your stuff, about having someone else's perspective, and removing your bias from testing your baby, right? Your thing, getting a dispassionate person to facilitate the tests, to take the notes, to be a participant in the whole process and drive the research, gets good outcomes. Yeah. All right, home stretch. So we have talked about a lot of things, and over time, Lise is a voracious reader. I am somewhat less, but we have books and articles and videos that we think might be useful on this topic. So there's a link here that you can grab, screenshot or jot it down quickly. Otherwise, you can get in touch. That has a list of books, articles, videos, things that we recommend that might be of interest to you if you found our talk useful. So we have a couple of minutes left. So let's see if there are any questions. Nice job, Lise.
We made it on time this time. Yay!
Right. I've lost my, there's my mouse.
Any questions? We're happy to chat.
For some reason, I can't see the questions while that's sharing. So.
I don't see any questions popping up in the side. Someone asked me for a copy of the slides.
At the end of the slides, there's a link, all the
That
resources.
was me.
Oh, that was you, right. Cool. Hi, Eric. Yes, get in touch with us, and we will. Actually, you know what? If you grab that link, we will add. So let me paste that in here, and we will add a link to the slides on that document. And that will be the easiest thing. So it might take me a day or two. So apologies for that. But here is that link again with all of those resources. All right, Lise, what services do you recommend for doing testing a telehealth funnel that we're having, that is being built as far as end users?
And feel free to unmute and ask the question.
I don't know if they can.
Yeah, I checked. It says that participants can unmute themselves, allow participants to unmute themselves. So that's a kind of vaguish question. Oh, I think you sent it to the panelists and not to the attendees. There it is. All right. So Brian, I'm trying to understand, it's a little bit bigger question for, are you talking about recruiting? Because if you're looking for recruiting, there's lots of ways of finding people for telehealth. I have to say, that's one of the big things that I'm working on currently. The really nice thing is it's much more common than it used to be. It used to be an incredibly, so following them, booking a consultation. Is that what it is? So if you're doing that, I would really recommend that you're really careful with your PHI and PII, so private health information and personally identifying information. A lot of those things I wouldn't record if I were you. That is a pretty big group of people you can actually recruit from. If you don't have like an external recruiting partner, not a lot of people do. I've actually been able to recruit through Facebook, through Craigslist, through social networks like Reddit. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but when you're really looking for some very specific, populations, I would look for the if you're looking for something more than just somebody that needs telehealth, but in a specific format, I would go and look for those populations and where they talk online and elicit people from there.
I've had some luck with meetups, which may not be as useful for healthcare, but I'm sure like, cancer survivor meetups, depending on the malady, meetups are really like a concentrated group based around a certain issue or fun thing that they do.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about like online forums like Reddit and those sorts of things, people are documenting so much, you can actually get a lot of the problem space by just going back and reading their histories of things that people are talking about. And then you can start validating things, which is pretty interesting.
Any best practices for the food industry? Free food always is a great way of getting people to answer questions. So for the food industry, that would be my recommendation. I don't know. Oh, go on.
No, I was going to say that's a pretty broad question. When working in the food industry, I've done work in some physical spaces, but not as much around. Like, it's a very vague question. I don't know if people can unmute and actually give a little bit more detail. No.
I guess if they could, so someone else. Yeah, I'm an instructor at occasional instructor at General Assembly. It's a boot camp that has campuses all over the world. I've taught at the Sydney, Australia office and the Denver office, and I teach the UX. I have taught the UX class. They cover a wide range of content, including development and product.
So for the question, it looks like you're asking around the entrepreneurial background question. I was wondering where I should start getting them moving forward, become an app, while I prefer to spend less time as I have my own job. So kind of like a passive income kind of thing is what I'm gathering there. There's a really great book listed on the resources that's called Will It Fly? That's a pretty nice like way to start vetting ideas and see if they're working. And there's also another book on there by, I'm looking at my bookshelf, I'm trying to find it. There's another good book on there about validating product ideas. So I would say before you build an app, I would make sure that you understand the problem space and make sure that your app is solving a problem that people have. So if you spend all the time and money to build an app and it's not solving a problem, it won't bring you any money. But if you actually are validating that problem space, you'll be in a much better spot.
I would, to validate that, so it sounds like he has two app ideas. I would design them, and when I say design them, I mean like pencil and paper.
Yeah.
All them, you can buy like the 5 by what are they? 5 by 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
The postcards, do they still exist?
Yep.
Your kids have them. Draw them on small piece of paper, pencil and paper, and use that as a way to have conversations. Because sometimes it's hard to explain what an app does. So a very low fidelity design for each of them, and use that as an opportunity to explore the problem space, like Lisa was saying. You want to explore, like, does this resonate? Is there something actually here? Create a really basic design and start asking people about it. Cool. I think we're out of time. It was 5 o'clock somewhere, and that somewhere is.
The 5 o'clock is Denver, where Startup Week is based.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone who listened in, and hopefully this was useful. If y'all have questions, you can find us on LinkedIn, and I know we're happy to answer questions. And appreciate your time, and appreciate you listening to us talk about stuff that we're really excited about.
Yes, and thank you all for attending. And as Ari said, we'll get this presentation up on that link here soon.
Cool.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Oh yeah, no jokes. You're right. It's harder to do virtually because then he's telling jokes to me.
I told jokes this morning.
Yeah, Ari's really good at the bad dad joke.
All right, hold on, because Eric asked. I'll find one. Everyone else doesn't have to wait for it. But I have a lot of bad jokes. Let's see. What do mermaids wash their fins with?
I don't know.
Tide.
Oh. That's a pretty good one. There you go.
That's a good, clean joke there, Ari.
Oh, but I'm pumped.
So, all right, we're out.
All right.
Great job, you guys. Have a great day.
Bye.